Well, good afternoon and welcome back to Lower Intermediate English Conversation with Professor Kent Lee. You should have gotten results back from your midterm, and it's time to start thinking about the final. For the final presentation, you're going to do sort of a pretend job interview. So I want you to start thinking about companies that you might want to work for. For the job interview assignment, I'm going to actually give you a choice of several kind of pretend companies. But to prepare for that, I want you to think about an actual company you might like to work for someday, maybe right after college. It could be a company, it could be an international company or a domestic company, it could be a school, or university where you'd like to teach, it could be a government agency, an NGO, organization, someplace where you would like to apply for a job right after college, or the first job you apply for, a company or a place that you would like to work for. And I'll send you the details later through the LMS, but I'll give you time to start thinking about what you want to do. And this is just going to be a very short, minor assignment. I'm going to have you talk for about a minute about a company that you might like to work for and why. What do you know about the company? What about the company is good? Why would it be a good place to work for you? So I'll give you the details. I'll give you the assignment later. I'll give you a little example of my own, maybe in the next video. Today we're going to continue talking about workplace English. And the focus is on the workplace, but some of this applies to other areas too. We talked about linguistic politeness, and a few of the linguistic devices involved are maybe indirectness and hedging, and some of these go together, they overlap. For example, indirectness. So let's say, I heard you two had an argument. Well, let's just say we don't see things the same way. And that's a very indirect way of saying we disagree, fundamentally. We don't see things exactly the same way. So there's indirectness, and there's also hedging, like exactly, not exactly. That's kind of hedging. You're kind of hedging or qualifying or limiting your the expression. You're not fully committing to the full kind of meaning of the statement. He's kind of, if you say, my professor is kind of weird, he's not, when you say kind of, he's sort of mean. My professor is kind of mean. He's kind of, sort of, he's a little bit mean, he's a little bit grumpy. Those expressions are hedges. I kind of feel like you're not being honest with me. So things like I kind of. Modals are sort of hedging, and this overlaps with kind of, we didn't really talk about this exactly, but they're sort of like distancing expressions. You distance yourself from maybe the truth or meaning of what you're saying, and that's kind of some of it goes along with hedging. So for example, if you say that, like I wouldn't do that, or such behavior is not quite appropriate. So using the kind of third person reference, like not this, but that or such, you're sort of making some distance between you and what you're referring to. Modals, like I might not be able to do that. So they're kind of sometimes used as hedges, and you're kind of distancing yourself from the statement. I could say I can't do that is like I might not be able to do that in time, or that might be kind of hard. We could do it if we had more time. And conditionals, if I were you, I wouldn't do it like that. If I could have more time, things like that. And so some of these are also more complex expressions. Instead of I can't do it, it's like I might not be able to do it or it might be kind of hard to do that. Or if I were you, I wouldn't do that. So grammatically more complex expressions are some things we do to make things more polite in English and many other languages. So now let's think about some workplace situations, and maybe a little bit later we'll get into some situations where you might practice some of these politeness devices. Let's just talk about some workplace situations first. Imagine you're on the job in the future job. What kind of situations might come up situations that you would describe with the following adjectives. What are some things that would happen that you would describe as challenging on the job, interesting, monotonous, boring, tedious, etc. So pause for a minute and think, what are some workplace situations that might be described like this? Okay, now some of these might be a little negative in some contexts. So in the interest of politeness, how would you rephrase some of these words to be more indirect or euphemistic? A euphemism is a more indirect expression. So for example, instead of saying, oh, my uncle died, you would say, my uncle passed away. Instead of saying, oh, she's really dumb, or you might say, oh, he's not very smart, not too bright. Euphemisms, indirectness. So in certain cases, instead of telling the boss, your behavior is really difficult, that coworker, he's really strange, or this work is really boring. What are some maybe more polite ways of rephrasing these when you don't want to, you want to say that this is not very good, but you don't want to sound like a complainer. And especially in maybe East Asian cultures, you don't want to sound too negative, or like you don't want to sound like a complainer or a person with a bad attitude, especially when you are new on a job, you're new at a workplace and people don't know you very well. They could easily snap judgments about you if you are just seem a little too negative. So what are some better expressions? Think of some actual situations you might describe, and then what are some maybe more indirect ways of describing these? Okay, first one. Well, challenging itself might be a little more euphemistic than difficult. Instead of saying his behavior is difficult, well, his behavior kind of presents some challenges, or this difficulty, this kind of problem we're in our project. It's difficult, or it raises some challenges, or well, raises some opportunities for learning and growth. You know, that sounds more indirect and a little more positive. The guy is strange. That new coworker, he's really strange. He doesn't exactly follow social conventions, or needs to learn some emotional intelligence. Oh, this work is really boring, monotonous, tedious. That's kind of hard. Well, it's not terribly exciting, but hey, it comes with the job. Oh, this is so stressful. Very maybe demanding or challenging is a little bit better than stressful. This project is really stressful. Oh, this project is really a challenge. This is really a growth and learning opportunity. Or he's rude. Well, he doesn't understand social norms very well, or he needs to learn company culture. Something like that. Now let's talk about complaints. We talked about politeness and how some politeness expressions differ according to social level, social status. So imagine, take complaints to begin with. Let's say someone's behavior on the job has offended you, and you need to tell that person. You have to tell that person. You can't ignore it, because it needs to be addressed so the person will change, so they don't keep offending you and other people. How would you tell your boss? Okay, maybe something that the boss is doing is kind of annoying or offensive. Maybe he doesn't know and he needs to change. How would you tell your boss? How would you tell a coworker who is maybe slightly more senior than you? They've been on the job a bit more. They have a bit higher status. I mean, they're kind of equal in the general social hierarchy, but he or she is just a little bit over you in status because they've been there longer and they know a lot more than you do. Somebody's completely equal with you, A coworker who's completely equal, a coworker who is a newbie, a new person, and they're new on the job, a new person, a beginner, a newbie is kind of a slang term. And then maybe a subordinate, somebody who works under you. You're sort of their supervisor or boss or manager. How do you complain to the person? And as you go through this, what are differences in some of those kind of linguistic devices, indirectness? What are linguistic differences in the expressions that you're going to use for these situations? So pause, think of some situations and how you would address them with people of different levels. Okay, if this were a real class, we could have some fun doing this in a real class, but I'll leave it to you to practice on your own. I'll also put these slides at the end of the video so you can maybe review them and practice them if you aren't able to right now. Now, in the last task, you had to complain to someone. Now let's say somebody complains to you, something you did, or your behavior, or you made a mistake in the job, or poor work performance. Your boss tells you your work performance hasn't been very good. Now, a common thing is, oh, I'll try harder. Does that sound convincing? No. Bosses have heard that before. Professors have heard that before. I'll try harder. I'll study harder. Try to be more specific. Come up with something more specific. Or, explain your problem. Don't just say, oh, I'll try harder, but I mean, explain your problem. Explain where I'm a newbie. I don't understand this procedure. I need help with this. I'm sorry, I messed up the project, but And again, coworkers of different status, subordinates. How would you respond to a complaint from somebody about your job performance, your behavior? Now let's look at apologies. How would you apologize for a mistake on a job to these different people? And as you go through this, then think about how are these different? How are the apologies different for people of different status? Is one more elaborate than the other? More grammatically complex sentences, more euphemisms, more indirectness? What are some of the linguistic differences you see when you make an apology to somebody of different status in English? Now you need to refuse a request. Somebody is asking you to do something. Your boss is asking you to do something, but you're overloaded with work and you've got a project deadline tomorrow. And there's just no way you can do it. You just can't do it. You have to say no. Coworkers, maybe similar thing. They ask you to do something and again, you just can't. It's not possible for you to do it. You have to say no. What do you do? Subordinates. Do you just say no? Or do you say no? Well, if it's like a sitcom like The Office, maybe you could do that, but in real life, what do you do? Pause and discuss. Okay, if you're saying no to your boss, it's probably going to be more elaborate, more likely an explanation of why. You're going to give an excuse, but also why. I'm sorry, I would love to. So you're also expressing interest or desire to, but you're also then saying explaining why you can't. I'd love to help you with that, but I've got this the big project, it's due tomorrow. And I've got to get all that stuff together and send it off to our headquarters. I could do it by Monday, but I just can't do it by tomorrow. Or can I have some more time? So you're being as indirect as possible. You're also showing as much as you can willingness to help. Willingness, but inability. If it's number 5, a person working under you, your subordinate, say, nope. Nope. Well, they're not going to like you as a boss. They're not going to respect you. Again, I'm sorry, I know you're new here, but as your supervisor, I've got a lot of other stuff going on. Why don't you ask, Ms. So-and-so for help? And suggesting referring someone to someone else. What are some other differences you saw in these refusals for different kinds of people? Okay. Be interesting to do in a real class. Okay, workplace difficulties. Let's move on. What are some signs to look for if you're doing a job interview? This might not be a good company to work for. We are going to do practice job interviews for the final in this course. If you're doing a job interview, what are some things to look for in the job interview that might tell you, this is not a good place to work for, and if they offer me a job, I might not want to take it. What are some bad signs to look for in the interview? Because when you go out to the interview, actual job interviews, you want to watch out for this. You may be desperate for a job, but is it worth working a bad job where you're going to be really unhappy or miserable, or people treat you badly in the job, or that's so stressful that you get sick? Is it worth it? I don't think so. So what are some signs to look for in the interview? Or you interview, you are offered a job, you take it, and you show up for work the first day. Your first week on the job. What might be some signs there, maybe your first week or so? It's not a positive work environment. It's not a healthy work environment. What are some signs to look for? What do you think? Pause the video and discuss, and I'll share you some examples of my own or from other people I know. Pause and discuss. All right, interviews. One of the biggest signs would be inappropriate questions. For example, if you're a woman and they ask you questions that are just sexist, like, are you going to quit and have a baby? Or are you really going to work for us long term? What if you have children? Those kinds of questions are not appropriate. I mean, if it's a good company, they should provide maternity leave for new mothers and other benefits for new mothers, and paternity leave for men who become new fathers, by the way. So obviously, socially inappropriate questions, that's the first sign. If that happens, leave. If that happens, don't take the job. Really, it's probably a bad sign that it is not a nice workplace. I once interviewed for a job, so this is a number of years ago. I was at an academic conference for English teachers. This was in the US. And sometimes at conferences like this, in a more practical field, like education conferences, you might be able to meet up with representatives from companies and universities who are hiring and do an interview there. And so I did 2 interviews at this conference, and they were both strange interviews. So the first one was this overly aggressive type. Usually an interview will start out kind of friendly with an icebreaker question, like, tell us about yourself, something like that. And then they'll kind of ease into the more serious questions. This one, the first interview, was kind of aggressive. No icebreaker type questions like, tell us about yourself. Is more like, okay, how would you teach this? So like, first question was something very direct, like, how would you teach this? okay, that's a little weird, a little off-putting. Showed that these interviewers, there were two interviewers, they didn't feel like, oh, are these really good interviewers? And then the interview goes on like that. I'm doing fine. Then they ask, what do you do if you put your foot in, if you stick your foot in your mouth? Now, that's an English idiom. To stick your foot in your mouth means to say something inappropriate or awkward or dumb looking. What do you do when you stick your foot in your mouth? Very strange question. They're starting to get aggressive here. So I said, I don't really do that. Then the interviewer said, well, have you ever stuck your foot in your mouth with your wife? Yes, they said that. Right then I knew, these are stupid people I'm talking to. I'm talking to some really stupid interviewers. This is a big company. This interview was in the U.S., but it was for a big company in Korea that provides language training for its managers and executives, and they have their own language training institute for their employees and executives. You might know who I'm talking about. Well, I said, I don't stick my foot in my mouth with my wife. And then it went on. A few days later, they offered me the job. I said no. I did not feel comfortable with them. And I told them, well, I wanted a more academic work environment. That's what I told them. The truth was, I'm not taking a job from you because you people are unprofessional and rude. And it gave me the impression that the whole company, the whole workplace will be like that. And later when I came to Korea, I met people who actually were working for this company as language teachers, and they told me it was a pretty heavy workload. It was not as nice. The job was not quite as nice as advertised. I don't know if it was really unprofessional, but it was pretty stressful, I guess. So I'm glad I did not take that job. Now, back to the conference, I did that one interview that was really weird. Questions that are inappropriate, job interview that's too aggressive, those are bad signs. Get out. Or leave politely and then don't talk to them again. If they say, come back for another interview, say no. If they say, hey, want a job, say no. That's not a good sign. All right, back to this conference. Right after that first weird interview, I had another interview. It was also weird in the opposite way, the extreme opposite. Apparently, this interviewer was not really qualified. He was from a university. It was from a university in Korea. I won't say who, because I didn't get the job. So this is more of an academic job, but this interviewer apparently was not qualified as an interviewer and apparently not qualified to really make any offers or decisions at all. And I don't know why they sent him there. So it was the opposite, it was the opposite experience to an unprofessional extreme of the other kind. It was a short interview. It was a person who had actually studied. He was working at a university in Korea, and he had done his master's at the same university where I'd done my master's in English education. So it was very informal. He said, oh, you studied at the University of Illinois. I went to the University of Illinois in that department. Is Professor Smith still there? Oh, how's he doing? How's Professor Jones? Did he ever get tenure? It was like very chatty like that. He didn't ask me any real questions about me or my qualifications or my teaching. Nothing. And then he said, okay, I'm going to recommend you. I'm going to recommend the school hire you. Oh, okay. And that was it. And then he never replied to me. No email. He never replied to me. He never emailed me back. I emailed the university. I said, hey, I interviewed with Mr. So-and-so, your representative at this conference. And he said he was going to recommend me. I'm wondering if you've made a decision. They didn't reply. I emailed the school twice. No reply. Okay, fine. I'm not going to ever apply for a job again at your university. And I'm going to recommend that other people don't apply there. If the employer is just not accessible, not reachable, Similar experience years ago. There were job advertisements from yet another university in Seoul, and I said, "Oh, that sounds like a good place to work." So they don't have actually direct application instructions in their job announcements online. It says, "Call this number. If you want to apply for this department, call this number." Well, I called, no answer. I called again, no answer. Called and called. Every time I called, no answer. I looked on the website for some other phone numbers for the departments, no answer. They never answer their phone. What's going on with you people? Okay, it's bad enough you don't know how to put email instructions for email applications on your job announcements. You don't even reply to phone calls when your instructions say call you. So those are universities that are probably not good places to work. Start a new job. What are some signs that the workplace isn't very good? Anytime during an interview or your first week, first month on the job, if you encounter lack of professional attitude, that's not a good sign. On the workplace, it might be that other people are aloof. They're not friendly to you. They don't care that you are there. That's a sign that it's not a healthy workplace. I've experienced that. First week on a new job, this was years ago, other full-time employees would go out to lunch and not bother to ask me if I wanted to join them for lunch. It was a very uncomfortable workplace. And I kind of regret maybe starting there or not standing up for my rights earlier, because it was a very awkward situation, a very awkward workplace. Another thing is you get into trouble because you didn't do something you didn't know about, and they just say, "Oh, well, that's the culture here," or "You should have known," or like, "I'm a new person here. Can't you, one, either have some consideration for the fact that I'm a newbie, or if this is important to you, shouldn't you have told me when I first started here, like my first week on the job? Shouldn't you have told me about this?" And if they just say, "Oh, you should know that," or "That's the culture here," or "That's how we do things here," that's not a good sign. That's a sign of an unhealthy workplace where you probably don't want to stay. Now let's move on. A lot of times if you take a course in conversational English or Hagwon course, they'll have kind of like very standard vanilla type workplace situations. How do you answer the phone? How do you make an order? Kind of very normal stuff. But they don't prepare you for also some of the difficulties in the workplace. So we are talking about some of the difficulties in a workplace, maybe where you're probably having to use English. Maybe an international workplace, for example. Okay, difficult workplaces. Things like workplace bullying and mistreatment, those are serious problems actually. You don't hear about it much, at least I haven't, but it is a serious problem. It's maybe starting to get some attention in the US and in Europe. These can cause serious problems in the workplace. And I'm not going to go into bullying, but let's just talk about manipulation. And this could be a workplace, it could be any other environment or situation. What are signs that somebody is trying to manipulate you? They're trying to use you, treat you unfairly. Particularly, what are some expressions that they use to pressure you, to trap you, to force you into doing things, or some expressions they use and they turn against you in order to put you down, to make you feel bad, to insult you, to bully you, to manipulate you? What are some expressions? What are some things that they say in order to manipulate you or to play with your mind? Pause and discuss. Okay, here are just a few. You said that. So let's say you're talking to a sales client, and well, you said that you are looking for let's say you're trying to buy some software for your company, and you're talking to a software vendor, and you tell them, well, we need software that can do this and this and this for this kind of price, and the vendor comes back and describes the product, but you're not fully convinced. Something isn't quite right, or it doesn't seem quite like what you really want. But the vendor says, but you said, if it can do this and this and this, you'll buy it. Like, no, I didn't quite say that, but you said that. And you can try to reason with them, but they're not going to be reasonable, or they will try to trap you in what you said, overcommit, overinterpret what you said. Better example, a coworker or boss said, well, you said you would agree to lead the project, but okay, but that was assuming you were going to give me the resources I need to do this project. But you said, okay, so they try to trap you in what you said. They interpret what you said literally, rather than considering, the complexity of the situation. Okay, another one might be, I would never do that, or we would never do that here. And sometimes that might be valid, but sometimes it's a way of kind of using peer pressure to push you into do something. We would never tell the boss that so-and-so did something wrong or cheated on the project or did something illegal in order to get the project done. We would never do that. Well, okay, but I'm not you, and I want to do things right. There's something wrong, I got to tell the boss. Something like that. Those can be subtle ways of using peer pressure to push you to doing something you might not want to do. And again, there are cases for all of these expressions. There are times when they're perfectly okay and valid, but sometimes they might be used to push you and manipulate you. Right. Oh, this is a great work opportunity. Don't throw this away. Well, maybe, but maybe there are other considerations, like there are reasons maybe why this wouldn't be a good thing to do. Don't quit your job, your parents tell you. It's a great opportunity. Don't throw away your life and career. You spent all those years in college, and now you want to quit this job. Don't throw it away. But God, the job is so stressful, and they treat you bad, and you're making you physically sick. I'm not throwing away the opportunity. I just need to go in a different direction. A good worker, employee, man, woman, would do this. A good worker is always going to do what the boss says. Well, what if the boss is being unreasonable? This is how we do things around here. That's the culture here. Well, yeah, but you never told me. Or if it's that important to you, you should have told me the first week. That's the procedure, or that's the culture here. Or this is how we do things around here, but what you're doing is not right. Let me do it my way. Like, no, that's how we do it here. So sometimes, these phrases are not necessarily manipulative, but they can be used by manipulators. So there are probably a lot of other expressions to look out for, but there are a whole video series on manipulation and avoiding even workplace manipulation. But just something to think about it in the real world. I've had some job experience, more so academic type experiences, but even in academic environments, some of this stuff happens. Fortunately, I'm in a good job now, and my last job was actually also quite good. But before that, I've had some unusual experiences. Most of my experiences, though, have been good. So, not trying to discourage you, but even in a good company, problems arise. In a good workplace, occasionally problems arise. There might be like one employee who's just a jerk, a bad person. And all the other employees are good, but maybe there's one coworker who's weird, or that one boss who's weird. Something to think about. One more thing. Inappropriate remarks. Somebody says an inappropriate remark, maybe it's even a sexist remark, and they try to get out of it by saying, oh, I was only joking, or I was just being sarcastic. What do you think about that? Donald Trump, when he makes some kind of crazy statement, then people call him out for it, and they point, these are the facts, okay? What you said was a lie. And then Trump or the White House will say, oh, he was just being sarcastic. Okay, an employee says something to you that's offensive, and you say, you hurt my feelings, that was offensive, and then the person says, oh, I was just joking, or I was just being sarcastic. What do you think about that? How do you handle that? Pause and discuss. First of all, there are ideas of social appropriateness, even if you are like a male and a female and they are technically equal in the workplace. One might have a little higher status because they've been there longer. Or one person, well, just because the person is even if they are completely equal, well, as soon as the guy maybe says something inappropriate to a woman, and the guy says, well, we're equals. How can you take it like that? We're equals. Even if they are equal position, or any kind of power, even if there's a status difference, or even if they are equal, as soon as the guy starts saying something that is sexist, putting down women, as soon as that guy does that, he is kind of trying to take a higher ground, like, you're an object for my enjoyment, I'm better than you, I'm higher than you. He is trying to elevate his status right there by making such a remark. He's trying to break the status relationship just by making that kind of remark and putting down a woman, making a woman feel bad. He is breaking the status relationship, and he's trying to assume a higher status just by making that kind of remark. Now, especially in Western culture, if you watch Western sitcoms, you might see this. Sometimes it's okay if they are friendly enough, if they are in good terms and they understand each other's humor. A slightly, very mildly offensive statement might be understood as humorous by both of them, and they're okay and they laugh, but people have to be close enough that they are comfortable with each other and the other person's intentions. Once a statement or joke goes too far, that it is considered inappropriate by the other person, probably is because the person is trying to assume a higher status in the relationship. With jokes, and especially with sarcasm, you may not like sarcasm. A lot of Asians don't like sarcasm, but it's common in Western culture. American, British, German, Western cultures in general appreciate sarcasm. Now, we do have social limits on what is appropriate for sarcasm, of course. It depends on the relationship, how well you know each other, the status, the power dynamics, and all of that too. So there are limits on sarcasm, but we do enjoy sarcastic humor. It is often considered good sarcasm can be a sign of intelligence, and actually some psychological studies show that it is a sign of intelligence, but it has to be appropriate for the situation and the social context and the relationships. When somebody tells a joke, and especially a sarcastic joke, there's usually a clue. Now some people are good at doing what we call tongue-in-cheek, like you say a joke, but you don't give it away. You don't give it away. Your expression is the same. What we call tongue-in-cheek humor or deadpan humor. They deliver it deadpan style. And sometimes comedy shows and movies are good at this. It depends on the deadpan humor. And the audience is the one who reacts and not the character or characters in the TV show or video. But usually, even if it's deadpan, there is usually, at least among friends in real life, there is usually some kind of clue or cue or a tell, what we call a tell, something that tells you it's a joke or it's sarcasm, a little tell. It could be something subtle. It could be slightly different intonation. Maybe the intonation goes up a little more. It could be the intonation. It could be a facial gesture. May or may not be a smile. Says, I was just joking. Raised eyebrow. Maybe the eyebrow raises. Or, some kind of facial gesture that they weren't doing a second ago. That tells you, I'm joking. Or exaggerated gestures. Maybe their gestures or their facial expressions are exaggerated a little bit, or just a little bit different than what they were doing a second ago. There is, and maybe just a slight raise in intonation or change in vocal intonation. There is usually something there, a subtle clue, a subtle cue that says, I'm joking or I'm being sarcastic. maybe the intonation goes up and down a little more. Maybe not rising, but maybe up and down just a little more than exaggerated intonation or higher intonation. Something a little different, a subtle cue. So when Donald Trump says, I was just being sarcastic, no, you're being insulting, you're being a jerk, you're being stupid, you weren't being sarcastic because there's no tell. Or the statement itself is exaggerated. So sometimes good sarcastic humor, the statement itself, maybe it might be completely deadpan, but the statement is exaggerated. Yes, I would like you to print off 4,000 copies of that by tomorrow. Okay, so what I'm asking is just very unusual. So I'm asking something very unusual. Okay, yes, I want you to type an essay, 40 pages, it's due tomorrow. Okay, obviously 40 pages is an exaggeration. So exaggeration, even if the delivery, the speaking is deadpan, there is some kind of clue, linguistic clue, intonation, gesture, something that tells you it was a joke or sarcasm. Okay, I'm going to leave these slides again at the end of the lecture for you to think about some more and start thinking about a company that you might like and like to work for. And I'll give you an assignment later. Next time, maybe I'll just give you an example of what to do for the next couple of assignments. We're going to do some short, like minor 10-point assignments where you speak, you record yourself, and you upload it to the LMS, and that's going to prepare you for the final. So it's time to start thinking about the final, and I will also try to give you some information about your options for the final. My past materials I need to revise because we are not going to do it as a group. Usually I do this as a group job interview kind of thing, but we can't do that this time thanks to the stupid virus. So it's going to be fully individual like the midterm. So I'm going to try to get materials to you either through LMS or through my website. All right, have a good day. I'll see you later.